Some analysts believe China is the world's most attractive country for solar manufacturing. Among them, Mohit Anand. He's a senior analyst at GTM Research. He joined me from Mexico City, where a major solar summit just wrapped up.
That's not really unexpected. And firstly, I should really clarify, China by far will remain in the pole position for years to come. I mean, just the size of that market in terms of just sheer energy demand and the immense priority that they've placed on solar energy to be a big resource to meet that demand is greater than many, many countries put together globally. And now with the US as well, I think with the extension of the investment tax credit that happened in December through Congress, I think the US is strongly positioned as a number 2 market, at least out to 2020. But then speaking of emerging markets, I think it's quite clear that these are really the markets where energy demand is quite high, and access to the sort of traditional sources of energy is quite sort of uncertain. And further, many of these markets rely on oil and natural gas, and these prices have traditionally been just so volatile, and that really impacts these economies in a very bad way. To add to it, they need to add capacity to meet the energy needs in a very, very quick way. And solar really meets all of these needs in a very excellent way because huge solar capacity can be ramped up very quickly. Solar is a very stable sort of energy source. Once you've put up the plants, you have that completely reliable for the next 20 years. And I think emerging markets are really seeing that opportunity in solar, especially now that the costs of solar have fallen drastically. I mean, just in the last 5 years, solar costs have fallen more than 70%. And over the next years as well, they'll continue to fall between 10 to 15%.
How varied are the products being installed around the world? In other words, if you go to one section of the world, are you going to find solar panels that look very much like what you would find in Mexico or the United States or China, or is there a variety out there?
So there's definitely a variety of technology within solar panels that's used globally, right? And that's really dependent on the exact kind of markets that you're operating in. So markets with excellent, hot weather, very high insulation like India or Mexico can actually do very well with thin film technology, for example. So there's definitely a lot of diversity in terms of technology. There's also a fair amount of diversity in terms of quality, right? I mean, in a market like Germany, where every minute of the day that sunshine falls on the panels really matters because the insulation is lower, you really want very high quality, very high performance modules that can really sort of make the most of all the sun that's shining in any given day. But clearly, there's a lot more leeway on that in emerging markets like Mexico, India, and other Latin American countries, for example, where the projects are just so spoiled for solar resource that they can afford to actually prioritize cost effectiveness over sort of high performance.
Mohit, the pricing of solar just really in a nice sweet spot right now, but oil prices are still very low, hovering just about $30 per barrel. Do these low prices have an impact on solar projects, perhaps make them less attractive, or because solar's priced right, is it doing okay and perhaps wind's taking a hit?
So we actually see a fairly large delinking between oil prices and solar prices, right? And that's because, I mean, honestly, oil is a primary resource for transportation, and only in very few countries and only to a sort of a modest extent of their kind of energy mix is oil actually used as a source of electricity. And which is why, solar on the other hand comes in as a very large installation resource. We have megawatts and megawatts and now gigawatts and gigawatts of solar energy tied into some very well thought out, clean, goals-oriented energy strategies, which actually are quite independent of oil and actually want to move away from oil in being consumed in any manner. So again, not used for electricity, but rather to even move away from oil in transportation.
Mohit Anand, Senior Analyst, Global Solar Markets, GTM Research. Thanks so much for joining us from Mexico City.